What is a limited company? This video is about what is a limited company at a basic level and who operates a limited company and how they all interact. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. You'll be very welcome. If you press the like button, it really helps me. So what is a limited company? It's a construct of the legal system over many hundreds of years where the company has a separate legal entity to any of the humans that are involved in the company. It can employ people, it can conduct a trade, it can own property, it can owe money. All the things that we as human legal entities, we can do, the company can also do as a legal entity in its own right. So how does this legal construct works? Well, it works in first place through a constitution. So the company has a constitution, it has memorandum and articles of association, which are set up when it's first incorporated and can be amended over a period of time. Now, for almost all companies, the memorandum and articles of association are completely standard, and to be honest, nobody actually reads them, but they are the constitution, and then they set up how the company will operate. So within that construct, that legal construct, you'll always have shareholders, directors, and then you may have some employees as well. So what do each of those people do? So in many companies, they might be the same people, so this can be confusing. But the shareholders, let's look at the shareholders to start with. So the shareholders will own a share of the business. So the company will be, shares will be divided into even 1 share, 2 shares, 100 shares, 1,000 shares, 1,000,000 shares, whatever. And each shareholder will own 1 share or many shares, which is a proportion of the share capital that they own. They're sort of the owners, so the shareholders look like the owners of the business, but they don't own the actual specific assets in the business. They just own some rights. So the important rights that the shareholders have are they have a right to receive dividends. So if the company makes a profit, those profits can be shared out amongst the shareholders as a dividend. So they get money as shareholders, a share of the profits. They are allowed to vote. So a shareholder can vote with his shares, and in particular, they can vote to decide who the directors are, but there are other things that they can vote on too. And then also, if the company is wound down, then the shareholders will get a proportion of the assets of the business. So they will get a share of the assets in proportion to the number of shares that they have. Directors. So who are the directors? So the directors are the people who are in charge. They direct. The clues are all in the names. So the directors direct. So they're appointed by the shareholders, but once they're appointed, they're the ones that make the decisions about the company. And they'll act together as a board, so they'll vote within their board. And the directors will decide, any loans, they'll make decisions about the trade. They'll even make decisions about what dividends to give to the shareholders. It's also important to remember that the directors, because they're in charge, they can potentially be liable for the decisions that they make. They have to behave reasonably. They have to behave in the company's best interests. And there are various other obligations that they have, as well as the right to make the decisions for the company. And then we have the employees. We know what employees do. They go out and do work and get paid for it and get told what to do by the directors. There we go. Now, I know that in very small companies, the directors, the shareholders and the employees are a bit confused because they can be the same people. And let's face it, most companies are very small companies. So those roles are mixed and matched. But I think it's important to know which role you're in at any particular time, because you can then understand whether you should be making decisions or whether you're receiving dividends or what you're doing. So how do you create a limited company? Well, a limited company is created through a process called incorporation, creating the company. Now, that sounds very fancy and very difficult, but it's not. Although I might be doing myself out of a job by saying it's not. It's not very difficult. You can either do it with a formation company or you can go onto Companies House. You'll need to put down directors' names, their addresses, some personal details, and a similar thing for the shareholders. And you'll need a name, a unique name for the company, and the name needs to be a sensible one. They do restrict it to something decent and proper, but also you couldn't hold yourself out as a doctor unless you are a doctor, for example. But once you've set out the form, you've created the form, costs a few pounds, and then the company actually normally is created within a day or so. The company will need a registered office as part of the incorporation. So the registered office is the home of the company. It's where it lives, it's where it hangs out. And two important things happen at the registered office. First of all, it's on the register, so it's public information. So not everybody wants their private address on the register, so sometimes they have it at our accountant's office, but other places will fulfill that responsibility. So it's on the public register. Really important documents will always be served at the registered office. So if you're sued or if HMRC writes to you, they'll do it to the registered office. So important stuff goes there. And then also, because it's on the public record, junk mail will go there as well. So you get the sort of two extremes. Why would you want a limited company? Well, I can think of three big reasons. There's probably 1,000 reasons, but I can think of three big reasons. So limited company, the clue is in the name again, it's limited. So the shareholders have limited liability. So if the company trades and it loses money on the trade and it goes bust, the shareholders are not, in normal circumstances, the shareholders are not liable for that debt. So that matters less in a very small company because the shareholders and the directors are the same people. But when the shareholders are very different people to the directors, then the shareholders are not making the decisions, they're not part of the decisions, so they don't want to be legally liable for those decisions that the directors might be making. So limited liability means that the worst that can happen to the shareholders is they lose their shares, and that's it. So that's an important part of it. And it's important for small companies as well, because if you're doing something that you think is risky or somebody might sue you, you might want to have limited liability to protect yourself, protect your house. The next reason that I can think of for having a limited company is that it gives the company immortality. So individuals do not have immortality, but with a company it can accumulate capital and then it can go on for years, for hundreds of years, if needs be. And its shares can be split amongst family members, and they can be inherited by family members. This allows very large concerns to be made, which has advantages that the company can take, because large businesses can do things that small businesses just can't do. And then the final reason why, and perhaps this is probably the most important for small companies, is that in certain circumstances, limited companies pay less tax than individuals. So if you operate through a limited company, you construct it in such a way as you don't pay as much tax as you would if you're an individual. And that is a motivator. And in the past, it's a big motivator for people to go limited. So shareholders agreements. A lot of companies have shareholders agreements, particularly small companies where people who are not related come together to run a business. So why would you want a shareholders agreement? Well, very often it sets out what individuals can do, where there might be circumstances where you want unanimous support for employing more people, or for opening a new branch, or for closing the business, selling the business. You might want rights to do with who can sell and how you sell the business. And in particular, if you've got somebody who's got 25% of the shares, 25% of the shares doesn't give you any control, because somebody else might have more than 50% of the shares, and therefore you have no control over the business. So you might want a shareholders agreement to protect yourself and say, okay, we'll only invest in this business if you also say, you'll consult us before you sell the business, you won't enter into certain contracts, and you'll consult us if you do something large. So the shareholders agreement very often protects the minority shareholders in the business. And it also can set out just how you're going to operate. So you've got something that's written down. I mean, my memory is frighteningly sieve-like. And remembering things very often is we sort of retrofit our memory to fit the facts as we want them now. So having a shareholders agreement writes down exactly what you intended when you start your business. And sometimes that means that you find areas of conflict before you get into business, which either means you don't start a business or you actually fine-tune them and decide what the business is going to do for sure and compromise before you set up, so that so you have a harmonious relationship as the business proceeds. So finally, just a fact about limited companies. There are loads of limited companies. When I looked at the register just before doing this video, there was 4.2 million limited companies. And of those 4.2 million companies, 2 million are actually active. But 2 million is such a large number. It's that suggests that on average, I don't know, 1 in 5, 1 in 4 people has a limited company. And when you consider the huge number of people who are just employees, there are just so many limited companies. So I was quite shocked when I saw that there were 4.2 million limited companies. So that's my take on a simple guide to limited companies, how they work, what the important things are within the limited company. Thank you for watching. If having watched this, if you want to see other videos, other similar videos, then please, you may want to consider subscribing to the channel. And it does really help me if you press the like button. Thank you.